Hello, and thank you for joining me. My name is Mike Roberts, and welcome to this snippet from the Song of Solomon. And this is our 10th snippet. And if you haven't watched the previous ones, I want to encourage you to go back and watch those as well. These can all stand alone, but they also build upon each other. And I believe to get the maximum benefit from these, it's important to watch them in order to get the most complete story and get the message from this that Jesus, I believe, wants to give us through the book of the Song of Solomon. So in this snippet, we're going to pick up right where we left off last time. We've been hearing so far, as we've made our way through this first chapter, we've been hearing primarily from the Shulamite maid. She's done most of the talking so far. And as we've discussed, she represents you and me. And in the last snippet we finally got to hear from Solomon. And Solomon represents Jesus, and we got to hear a beautiful, encouraging, and very loving message that he gave his bride in that snippet. And we're going to see this pattern continue. Throughout the book of the Song of Solomon, we see that the Shulamite maid, which again speaks of you and me, she does most of the talking. And Solomon chimes in here and there, but a lot of the talking comes from her, but it exposes our heart for the Lord. And then when he does speak, we get very precious and special words from him, spoken back to our hearts. So in the last snippet, we heard from Solomon, and this time we're going to pick up the Shulamite maid. The bride is thinking about him, and you can see she's in love with him. Her heart's just very full. And this is what she says. We're going to read together verses 12, 13, and 14 here in the first chapter of the Song of Solomon. And this is what she says. While the king was at his table, my perfume gave forth its fragrance. My beloved is to me a pouch of myrrh. And she says, it lies over my bosom all night. Right over her heart is where it was lying all night. And she says, my beloved is to me a cluster of henna blossoms in the vineyards of En-gedi. And so she begins talking about him and thinking about him, and she's given these very dramatic, very clear pictures of what he reminds her of. And so the perfume she talks about in verse 12 was nard, which was a very expensive perfume. But she had put this on herself, and it was giving forth its fragrance, and he could smell her. And then in verse 13, she says, and to me, he is like a pouch of myrrh, which also had a very beautiful fragrance, had a very pleasing aroma. And it lied all night long over her heart, which is where he was. And her heart was just full of him. And the aroma from the myrrh would have just covered her, and everyone around her could have known she's been with Solomon, been with her king, with her groom. And then verse 14 is the one I want to look at the most in this snippet. She says, my beloved is to me a cluster of henna blossoms in the vineyards of En-gedi. Now, En-gedi is a very beautiful spot along the shores of the Dead Sea. And I have never been there, but I've seen pictures of En-gedi. And the Dead Sea, as you probably know, has a very high salt content. And it's called the Dead Sea because fish can't live in the water. The water really can't support life because it's so salty. And so much of the terrain and the shore around the Dead Sea is just rocky, it's dusty, it's barren. But En-gedi is a beautiful oasis that's right along the shore of the Dead Sea. It sticks out like a sore thumb because it doesn't look like the rest of the terrain. And it's one of only 2 places around the whole sea where there's fresh water. And so she's talking about him and how he reminds her of this beautiful spot that is right in the middle of all this death. And we know from what Jesus said in John 10:10 that the enemy comes, the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. But Jesus came to give us life and give us life more abundantly. And so she's begun to experience this abundant life in the middle of this dark world where the enemy is very active. We can see the death and destruction without looking too hard. We can see what he's up to. But she goes, Jesus, my bride, my groom, Solomon to me is like henna blossoms right in the middle of En-gedi. And so she's talking about this beautiful, lush paradise that she experienced with Jesus right in the middle of a dark world, which is what you and I can experience as well. Jesus offers us life more abundantly. It's a life of provision. It's a life of rest, a life of refreshing. And there's that fresh, pure, clean water available in En-gedi, which we have in His presence.